All righty, we are live. Welcome in, everybody. While we wait for everybody to come in, I'm just going to go through my little intro. So, for all of you who know who I am, thank you for returning. I very much appreciate it. This is Calibrated Roundtable number 5. I haven't done one of these for a little bit. I've kind of been busy on the weekends, so I'm trying to get one in right now. I have currently Zaganel and Alex, two people that you know very well from previous shows that will be coming up and speaking. Von Clown might also be joining, so we'll be getting into that. If you guys want to support me and find more of my work, you can do so by going to the link in the description of this video. You can find all of the places where you can find my work. If you are interested in the people that are coming up, especially Zag, you can find him on Twitter, but we will talk more about that later. Without further ado, Zag and Alex, how are you guys doing today? Zag, go first.
Hey, Scott. Hey, Alex. How you guys doing? Happy Saturday. I've been enjoying the nice weather here.
Alex, how are you doing?
Greetings, fellow reprobates in Putin shield. I'm doing wonderfully. The weather is nice in Moscow for once. It's not particularly hot. Yeah, the weekend's looking nice. Glad to be here with you.
Yeah, no, it's like 102 here, so it's a little warm where I'm at, but it's not too bad. It's nice indoors, so that's where I'm spending the day, and we get to do a nice little roundtable. So I'm glad you guys are here today to talk with me. We have quite a bit to talk about. Is there a particular topic you guys want to jump off with? Because I'm good to talk about pretty much anything.
Yeah, I mean, what this peace proposal is probably taking the spotlight, especially going into the weekend. What do you think? That's there's a lot of controversy about that and about the points that Putin made and basically his plan of action has been what basically received as a no-go by the West and Ukraine. And now we're hearing that Zelensky is coming up with his own counter proposal. So we'll have to see what that looks like. That's going to be interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think
the Putin doctrine.
Yeah, I think it's
offer 2 is better than offer 1 and worse than offer 3. Sorry,
yeah.
Please continue, Scott.
I mean, no, it's very straightforward. You're right, Alex. What I was going to say is it's not a peace proposal. It comes with multiple non-starters. So in terms of actually, achieving some sort of ceasefire and peace, both of the deals, Putin's and Zelensky's, their proposals at least, are not really deals. They're not supposed to actually achieve anything. What they're trying to do is signify that they're looking for peace, at the same time basically issuing minimum objectives to the other side, telling the other side what is going to happen, what they can choose to accept right now, or what they will be forced to accept later. That's what a lot of this seems like. The first and foremost, the Ukrainians retreating from positions right now is completely against the narrative of the current regime in Ukraine. That's not going to happen. That's a non-starter. Sanction relief from the West would be an omission from the West that the Ukraine project has failed entirely. Their proxy war has failed, and likely their hegemony comes to a abrupt end on that specific date. At least historically, I think that's where people would see that the end of the U.S. hegemony. And then finally, NATO neutrality and no progress towards nuclear weapons in Ukraine. That is the base, like that's the minimum for Russia to even begin to think about coming to the negotiating table. So in all totality, I don't really think that there's much to even look at with this. We kind of do this same thing every 6 months. The only aspect of this that I would really look at is look at what Putin said were the minimum requirements for them to come to the table. That is now the minimum Russian war aims. So Kherson City, Zaporozhye City, the entirety of those oblasts, Kramatorsk. You realize, I mean, Kramatorsk, Donbass, Luhansk, finishing off those oblasts. If you paid attention, you would realize that the Kharkov sanitation area, the 10-kilometer border zone or whatever that they're attempting to create right now, was not mentioned in this deal. I think that was sort of take the deal, and you're not going to lose Kharkov, you're not going to lose Sumy, you're not going to lose Chernigov. And Ukraine is obviously not going to take this deal, and Russia is now going to achieve those goals at the minimum. So that's how I see this whole thing playing out. Tell me what you guys think.
I mean, I think the very first point is that the deal offered here by Putin is a very, very good one. From Ukraine's point of view, especially. Like, they get to keep most of their country. They get to keep Odessa and the Black Sea coastline in some sort of final configuration. But then obviously we'll get to the next point, and President Putin will add, to our previous war aims, we would also demand the entirety of Dnipropetrovsk and Odessa Oblast. And if they don't accept that one, he will add, well, I don't know. Well, Kharkov's a given. Zhytomyr and Kiev Oblast, perhaps, and then we'll keep going and going and going. And, well, what choice have we?
No, yeah, I agree, and I really just I think we were at this point in 2022, basically when the Russians decided to mobilize. I mean, there were pathways back, but the second Istanbul failed, and the second the Russians realized what they had to do, I'm pretty sure peace has been completely off the table. I've said it since 2022 that I don't see how peace is possible. Number one, Zelensky has made it illegal to negotiate with the current Russian regime, and until one of the two are removed, and I don't think Putin and the Kremlin are going anywhere. I'm pretty sure everybody's on the same side with me there. It's going to have to be Zelensky, and that regime is going to have to be toppled in some manner. So I think that's how you're going to see this whole thing eventually end.
Yes. I think many of us in this information space are so aware of this, but outsiders might not be, that Zelensky wasn't elected most recently. His term was extended due to a parliamentarian ruling in the Ukrainian Rada. Putin won very comfortably. Now, say what you want about cheating or not cheating. Even if you were to cheat with a 7 or 8% margin, he still has an overwhelming majority of support in the country, right? Easily
according just for everybody listening, according to third-party resources outside of Russia who have done polling popularity of the Russian president, he is in the 60 to 80.
And he's gone.
Uh-oh. Hopefully he pops back.
Anyway, yeah, I mean, you could take 10% off Putin's popularity and he'd still be sat at 3/4.
Right. And if you look at it that way, juxtapose it to Zelensky, I mean, that's part of there's, I think Zelensky's got a bit of an inferiority complex to an extent, knowing he doesn't.
Which really gotten to him. It's really gotten to him.
Yeah, he's not coming from a position of power whatsoever. It's more and more clear that his position is becoming tenuous, and that only with the support of very key backers, meaning Scholz, Macron, Biden, maybe the Italians. Otherwise, no one's going to be able to back him sufficiently with promises for strike capability in Russia proper. The Poles can't do it really. The Italians can't really do it or won't. It's just the French and the British thus far. Oh, Scott, we got you back.
Yes, I'm sorry. I got right into the middle of my little speech there, and then my computer it keeps doing this thing, but it hasn't done it probably for the last 7 or 8 live streams I've done in videos, where it just disconnects all of my USB connections. So my camera went.
The one that says you're chatting with an IP from Moscow, die.
I just wanted to go through some of the comments that I've seen here. Shallow Darkness says, I wish I could support you, Scott. Inflation, low payment has fucked the shit out of me, though. Guys, you do not have to give me money. That's not, if you are struggling in life, you take care of you and your own first. That is this content is free for you. It's here to inform you. I'm not here to make money off of it. I'd like to continue doing this full time. I enjoy doing it, but honestly, guys, do not worry about me at all. You take care of yours. Enjoy the content. It is free. Calibrated and
subscribe to your YouTube.
Yes, please subscribe and like and keep supporting and share it if you can. I really do appreciate that. Thank you, Zach. That is true. Calibrated and DPA open mics starting at the exact same time. Weird coincidence. I don't know what time DPA starts his open mics. He lives in like Singapore, so he is doing a very late open mic, I guess. This is usually the time I record. So, all right, go ahead, guys. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, no, we were just talking about how Zelensky's counter proposal will be coming from a place of weakness and not strength, given his sort of illegitimacy or tenuous position as unelected president. Even though there's a provision in the law, of course, and we're reminded about that all the time. But still, there has not been a democratic process, and Ukraine hasn't mobilized ages 18 to 25 or gone full-scale war in a lot of other areas. So I think Zelensky knows that he's a domino that might have to fall to sort of end this conflict in the short term.
The crazy thing to me is I put this in my post is even if he goes AWOL against what the West wants, which is not going to happen. But let's just say Zelensky gets some amazing amount of free agency, decides to go and negotiate with the government, goes and negotiates a settlement, a good settlement for Ukraine. What's going to happen? The West is going to go, we don't want that. They're going to coup Zelensky out of that position. They're going to say he was not the democratically elected president. He was a, constitutional dictator, if you will. And he that agreement with Russia is now null and void, and we're going to continue the war. So this is all just nonsense. This is none of this is real. This is just it's like communication is how I see it. The West or Russia Putin got up and said, okay, you're not going to invite me to the G7. You're not going to, or he's not that he's invited to the G7, but you're not going to invite me to this meeting of international leaders where we're discussing the war that my country is a part of, that you are fighting through a proxy against us. So you don't really want peace because that's not how you achieve peace. So now I'm going to come out and I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. And that's basically what that's exactly what this was to me. I don't see this as anything else. And I do like that it has escalated now. It is no longer ceasefire where we're at, and we'll discuss the situation in these annexed regions. We can, we might move some of it into Russia, this, that, and the other. No, he didn't mention Crimea. There was no mention of Crimea at all, which is a non-starter now. There's no talk of it. He's not saying, hey, you need to recognize Crimea as Russia. He didn't mention it. It's not even on the board anymore. It's not something that they even need to have acknowledged. And it really, and then the entire Russian government too, the way they were talking about it, that they seem so bullish right now. It's crazy. Peskov and I think Lavrov both made statements that were basically like, yeah, of course they didn't accept it. They're never going to accept it. We knew they weren't going to accept it, and that's why we put it up. So they don't seem like they're in any jeopardy right now. Sorry, my dog is snoring. But yeah, I don't know. What do you guys do? You guys kind of get the same feeling from his proposal?
I mean, it's the logical conclusion. But also, if we were to circle back a smidge to the Zelensky legitimacy issue, basically, following the series of coups Ukraine has experienced, of all the people who wrote the fucking constitution live in Russia. So, and what they say repeatedly is that the law that gives him the extension, the provision of that, cannot supersede the constitution. So no matter how you spin it, he is illegitimate.
Yeah, he's
Yep.
Europe's newest little dictator. Go ahead, Zach.
Oh yeah, he's he's the handpicked, dictator that the Brussels approved strongman, if you will, and it just doesn't fit him. It doesn't suit his character well. It's not the type of man he is. Now, a lot of people have given him a very hard time, but you have to understand where he's sort of coming from. He doesn't have the skill set and the tools of a multi-decade long political operative. He just doesn't. So he's at the whims of advisors and probably foreign counsel in a lot of cases, and he's been misled and he's been used and manipulated, and his life's been completely ruined.
But also, so this is a point that I always come to. I feel bad for people who get stuck in really shitty situations when they were trying to make the situation better. But also, the dude seems like he's railing coke 24/7 and kind of a piece of shit all the time. So I'm like, yeah, it seems like he's kind of stuck in the situation, but also he kind of just seems like he's enjoying the ride. And so I don't quite feel so bad for him.
Yeah, especially if guarantees have been made. I think at least maybe they've learned. That's sort of like the CIA and Western operative groups that took out Saddam and Muammar Gaddafi, and the optics were very bad, and I think they understand that now. And I think for the PR purposes of this conflict, they just can't allow Zelensky to go out. They can't allow him to go out that way. I mean, you cannot recover from that sort of thing. Every major newspaper will be just completely mocking, sort of the U.S. deep state apparatus if something like that happens. I mean, we just can't, as an American, and Scott, you too, we can't afford for something like that to happen. Our credibility will be completely ruined forever. So Zelensky's going to have
Vietnam.
Yeah, well, and some people said it was over there, and then you had 2 more wars that failed, and several other sort of interventions like Libya and Syria. But I think Zelensky needs to be sort of scurried away somewhere to the south of France or Miami. I don't foresee him remaining in Ukraine after his removal one way or another, or toppling. But he's not going to be killed unless I can't see that. I just can't see that.
As we do it.
Sorry, I was typing. I didn't want you guys to hear that. I think that he is the man. He's going to be the man for until this thing is pretty much finished. There may be a single small change just to finalize some sort of deal eventually. But I think that I think that Europe in particular has put a lot of eggs in the Zelensky basket, and they're trying really, really hard to make his whole situation work still. Because the United States, Biden, they seem like they're done with Zelensky. Zelensky's not their man. He's the man that they have to deal with. But I think he's getting on everybody's nerves. I don't think he particularly does the job well. Like you said, he's a foreign policy nightmare. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's a comedian. This is why career politicians are career politicians, right? There are certain aspects of politics that, while gross, grimy, ugly, dirty, however you want to explain it, you have to be experienced. You have to understand the game. Because you can't play outside of it. If you watch people who try to play outside of it, you have like Trump. I mean, he's not exactly outside of it, but he was what you would call a non-establishment figure. And what happened during his first presidency? They tried to basically make him a Russian agent, which was completely fake. And ever since his presidency, they've been trying to throw him in jail because they are afraid of his what I would call, at least against the grain ideas. Not so much that he's going against the establishment. He's just not going in the direction that the establishment necessarily wants him to go. But Zelensky is he's just a puppet. There's no other way to describe him other than a puppet, and he's going to be the most infamous president in Ukrainian history, if there is Ukrainian history in the future, if that class exists.
Quick question. What episode of the U.S. suffers from the monster it made show are we on at this point?
Like probably like 32, because let me think. We had South Vietnam,
the Iranian, the
Afghanistan.
Islamic Republic of Iran.
The Iranians, Saddam.
Yeah,
Saddam.
Libya.
Israel, to some degree.
Idi Amin to an extent. I mean, he was our guy, and then until he wasn't.
Yeah, Idi
Stuff in
Amin.
Egypt too, right? Over the decades, we messed around in Egypt.
Sisi is America's thing too, because they helped overthrow Mubarak.
True.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And then they put Hosni in
deep
as well. So Egypt is like a straight continuation of several American monsters in a row.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy how the U.S. just kind of hasn't won anything in particular for like the last like 30, 40 years.
Oh, guys,
like other than literally shit kicking the holy hell out of a beat up Iraq, we haven't done anything.
We forgot the ultimate American made monster in quotes. Putin. 1994 was it? On the cover of Times Magazine, how we helped Yeltsin steal the election from Zyuganov.
Yep.
Good old. It's how hard do you have to fumble that ball though? Like that bag. The United States had post-Soviet Russia exactly where they wanted them, and they fumbled that bag so hard. That's crazy.
Yeah, because Big Brzezinski couldn't get enough of his own fucking inflated head.
It's
I love Brzezinski because the whole theory that the war in Afghanistan singularly caused the dissolution of the Soviet Union has no basis in reality, but is purely self-aggrandizing for his big new Brzezinski. Gotta give him credit for that. Go big or go home.
I think my father has participated in at least 4 civil wars, including like Angola and Mozambique and Afghanistan as well. And he says that he doesn't believe that Zbigniew got his way, even in Afghan.
I'm just looking for an article real fast. Yeah, here we go. So I wanted to bring this up because we were just talking about the monsters that the United States is creating for itself. The whole goal, if you guys are in agreement with me, I'm curious, but the whole goal of the Ukraine project was to cause regime change in Russia, repeat sort of what we saw 1991 Soviet Union collapse and turn into the Russian Federation, and then privatization of Russia and everything kind of destroys the country. It's that sort of thing, pulling Russia away from China and disabling that partnership. Didn't obviously work out, and now you can see that the G7 leaders are now accusing China of enabling Russia's war on Ukraine, which does that signify? Do you think that this signifies that China is actually now helping Russia at a more serious level, not militarily, but just in terms of trade, parts potentially for military appliances?
Yeah, I think
quick interlude, if I might.
Yeah, go ahead.
Post-opening China is another American monster come to bite them in the ass.
Yeah, that is going to be an issue they're going to be dealing with.
And I don't think China is helping Russia any more than it was, or in any larger capacity than it already was. It's just now, the Western partners are noticing it, and what are you going to get out of this? Beijing's going to deny it, and then what? Or let's say they don't. They're like, yeah, and what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
Same result. Nothing. What are you going to do? Decouple from China? Sanction China? Bifurcate the global economy worse than it already has been? Remember 2 years ago how everyone thought I was crazy when I kept saying they would have to come down to secondary sanctions and bifurcating the world economy?
Yep. It's the only way that they're going to be able to stand up to it at all. They're going to lose. that's what I think is going to happen. We're going to lose. I say they like I'm not fucking living here. The collapse of
it's a
the
public
USSR was a
campaign.
tactical move by Russia to give ground to extend the U.S. to come to this moment.
I think we would rather have avoided that, to be honest.
The 35-year tactical feint.
I honestly think we would have rather avoided that.
That's
But I think the interesting thing here is the ruble bouncing up against the yuan of all things after the stock market was sanctioned. So that's an interesting sign because it technically means that we've gone up against the dollar, because now that we can't trade against the dollar, we have to go through the yuan. Interesting things are happening.
That's the interesting thing. People often overlook the Chinese payment system is expressly made to be able to be used as an interim between the American system and others who are, shall we say, not strictly allowed to use it. So that's
I mean, we cobbled ours together pretty quickly, and it works quite well. I can send money to people in China. You can get a Union Pay card in Russia at Gazprom Bank.
I tried to figure out U-money, and I could never get it to work.
It requires one to be Chinese. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. I mean, the ruble talk and the MOEX talk in the last few days has been mind-numbing, and how many people do not understand what graphs mean, and like people were pushing graphs of the ruble gaining against the dollar as look, the ruble's collapsing.
In my sort of circles in Moscow, the big reaction was, wait, they didn't sanction the exchange before?
Yeah, I don't
exactly.
Most people kind of assumed that it was already fucked.
You'd think SWIFT exclusion would have stopped like USD trade to begin with, because what the hell are you gonna do with USD anyway? You can't use it.
I didn't. Yeah, was the reason that they slowly put on the sanctions just to try to prevent like self-harm, like the double-edged sword aspect of the sanctions, because it's, they've been trying to put sanctions on. It feels like they're just doing it now because they have no other choice. They have like nothing else that they can do. So they're just, we'll sanction this, we'll sanction that. And now they're going to try to sanction China. And that's not going to play out very well for them. I can't possibly see that working out for the United States. It feels like they've blown their big top secret ultra weapon that they were going to use against a major superpower to try to destabilize them. And now everybody has kind of seen that playbook. And I mean, you don't think the Chinese economy is now fully prepared to deal with that? I mean, it just seems like the US has lost like strategically already. And now we're just clawing our way.
Anything the Chinese economy has had historic problems with, we can always help. Well, the big one, of course, is airplane engines. There's a certain engineering maturity in the post-Soviet Russia that would very much help.
It also helps that China's entire growth strategy is built around anti-containment, based on the lessons learned from the Soviet Union during the Cold War. It's almost like they learn from things and we don't, so they're a step ahead. Like, I've been writing about this for a while. It's maddening. Every brilliant idea, any political policy establishment elite has to offer is, let's do exactly what Reagan did. Let's do exactly what we did during the Cold War, because we have no new ideas and don't understand that the context and circumstances are not the same.
I mean, it's almost like sanctioning the world's largest producer of commodities and the world's largest consumer of commodities, which share what is effectively a land border through a country that has no choice but cooperate, to be quite honest, in Mongolia's case. Like it's almost like that was a bad idea.
Almost. Like, I can't imagine why. Also, what amuses me greatly is the whole thing about pushing Russia into China's arms is all of a sudden the Straits of Malacca aren't as much of a single point of failure anymore. Who could have foreseen that? Oh, right, I wrote about that 10 years ago.
Yep. Honestly, if it's between China and us, if we really felt like it, we could dig a fucking channel, like all the way through. If there was a specific need, I'm sure we could get the manpower together.
Yeah, I just don't. It like you said, we just don't learn lessons. It's like very childish, and we think the same thing is going to work, and we keep trying the same thing over and over again, and we just keep losing and losing and losing, and it's kind of getting hard to watch. I'm also really tired of talking to very, very stupid people. It's burning out my brain a little bit.
I mean, the
Just a
United
bit.
States just isn't. It's just not willing to do what it takes to counter what's going on with its current policy. There's no indication that the U.S. military is going to ramp up basic production for trench warfare style fighting. There's no indication that the large defense companies are going to pick up drone. No, that's still all private and small and very China reliant. I mean, U.S. domestic industry is making some headway, but we are a long way from mass production without being fully. We're 60+% reliant on Chinese parts.
But that's the thing. To what end? To what end, Zag? Is this to eventually face off China, or is this in the context of the present?
Yeah, I mean, and if you look at it, yeah, exactly. If you look at it long term, you're going to have to do these things to face off. But short term, if you don't start, you're going to learn very hard lessons, and you're going to lose certain holdings, like Taiwan. Basically, you'll lose all your influence there if they put in a new political majority. I just think the U.S. is about, if we look at things objectively, we're about a decade behind in getting our shit out of areas that have very sensitive tech that we basically need to onshore to deal with geopolitical crises, like anything involving semiconductors and advanced microprocessing chips. That's a huge problem. Also, we need to secure way more mining access in the DRC and in the developing world, because our government can't directly do it. We have to work with private companies for these things. So it's much harder than, say, the Chinese government that just throws its weight behind all these ventures. So, I mean, yes, we're about a decade behind in getting our shit together to be fully self-reliant without having to take a serious economic correction, in my estimation. So it's
the semiconductor manufacturing is another thing we could add to a monster that America's own making, is we could have subsidized. Well, I say we because Canadian, but y'all could have subsidized the shit out of Intel when it started falling behind its competitors, because Intel has its own fabs. It used to be ahead of the game. It got stuck at around 10 nanometers, and now it's just 3 generations behind. Could have subsidized that, avoided this whole thing, had an American manufacturer making American parts at a competitive scale with TSMC. But y'all decide, no, you know what, we're just gonna have everyone outsource everything to Taiwan. What could go wrong? It's not like this is an ongoing problem. It's not like the PRC has had it's not like there's an unfinished civil war that's technically been going on since the 1950s here. It's not like we've had 3 previous crises in the Taiwan Straits. Who could have foreseen this? I don't know. No one could have anticipated this.
Hey,
Then they sold IBM
cheaper,
to China.
it's cheaper that way, clown. We don't want to spend the money.
Oh, speaking of production and factories, I showed a particularly entertaining image with Scott previously. I reckon if he can find it, I'm sure you gentlemen would find it rather entertaining.
Which one was it?
It's the big gray square of doom.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah. I'll save it and then bring it over.
We had a good laugh over that one.
Yeah, just very quickly. I know Vaughn was sort of laughing about this for a while, but the body armor and tourniquet discussion has returned in force in certain spaces. So
what?
just be aware of that. It's coming back.
The
The
what?
what?
That the Russians don't have body armor or tourniquets for injuries in the field. That's now a resurfacing claim in certain spaces.
I think the issue is that the Soviet Union made 3 quintillion tourniquets, and we have no idea what to do with them. Yeah, this is the gray square of doom I mentioned.
This is the large
The
industrial tank
factory
plant
space.
in Russia, and it's the size of a city. I'll actually look up a picture of it.
I sent you a couple when we were discussing this.
Yeah.
The biggest
UVZ
question
plant.
one. Pardon?
The UVZ plant, Mike. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, the biggest yellow square is the French Nexter Systems. Then the other one's the Lima plant, and then there's a couple German ones.
It's always funny to me is that it's like, oh, Russia only has 1 tank plant. Yes, and that tank plant is 7 square kilometers.
It would not be the smallest country on Earth if it was independent.
Yeah,
But
that's
also,
so
it's
funny.
not the only one. There's also Omsk Transmash, which makes the T-80 tanks, and Kurganmash, which makes all the smaller IFVs.
Where is it next to? I'm gonna look
Nizhny
at.
Tagil, near Yekaterinburg.
Oh, I can just do it on my map. What am I
Yeah,
doing?
that's well out of Ukrainian strike range too. So they're upset
Well, it
about
was
that.
moved there. It's the evacuated Kharkov tank factory.
Where did you say it was?
Nizhny
what city?
Tagil, Yekaterinburg, Sverdlovsk region.
Oh yeah. Okay. And then do you know where it is when you zoom in there?
You can tell it's the big squares.
It's that big thing that's larger than a small country.
Yeah,
Yeah.
most of Russia's serious, industrial manufacturing, refining, mining interests are all basically in that region or a little bit east or slightly west.
There's
So
there's a lot of
there's a
factories
reason for
in
that
area.
too.
Well, Yekaterinburg is basically the hub. Imagine like a flower, and each petal is an individual factory that produces something military related, and they all feed into Yekaterinburg, and then they take the high-speed rail into the central industrial region.
Yeah, the
which is
rail
Moscow
line here.
Oblast.
Okay, I'm just gonna show this because this is crazy.
But also, UVZ is a rail stock factory, so the rail line is expected to be gigantic.
Okay, so where is the actual tank factory?
Nizhny Tagil.
Am I even looking at it?
Look
It's right
for
around here, right?
a river. One
You
sec,
said it was
let me find. So it's north of Yekaterinburg.
north. Okay.
There it is. That's Nizhny Tagil.
Yeah. And then where's the plant at? Was that it?
It's basically the very eastern edge of the city. That's west.
Yeah. I was just looking. This is all the
And
housing.
then go a bit further, so you'll see some square lakes. Nope, bit south.
Bit south. Sorry guys. I could have Googled it.
Yeah, you're off again.
I'm off again. Okay.
So basically, just zoom in again. Onto Nizhny Tagil. Yep, keep going. Keep going. So see the big water feature? Then
Right.
there's a very straight road that does one single 45-degree angle, and then it's straight again. Yep.
This-
And then follow that road a bit more.
Out of town?
No, just basically just below where your cursor was.
Like right here?
Yeah, there it is.
Oh, that's it.
That
Yeah.
whole thing.
Yeah.
That thing is huge, dude. That's so big. And then look at there's like another factory right here too.
I believe that's also it.
Yeah, that's
And then
crazy,
there's a tank
dude.
proving ground somewhere on, like, as part of it.
This kind of
I mean,
So the giant thing in the middle that looks when you zoom out as a like it's a topographic feature is actually a factory.
the factory. Yeah, this is the factory right here.
It's-
That thing
it's
is
part of the
huge.
factory's yards.
This is it's so big,
Sorry,
dude.
It's
5 miles across.
7 it's 7 square kilometers.
Yeah, that's crazy, dude. There's nothing like this in the United States.
oh no.
There's literally nothing like this. Not for tanks, not for anything. That is
There it is.
crazy.
Yeah, this is basically the steel foundry that works for Uralvagonzavod. You can see the marked blast furnace number 5, number 6, etc., 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 etc.
Yeah, they refine their own
That's
steel
blast furnace
components
number
right
7.
there.
What a
Basically,
crazy job.
it's all done on
working in
site.
a-
What comes into
Yeah, that keeps
Uralvagonzavod
costs much
is
lower.
literally atomic elements, and what comes out are tanks.
Safest spot too. Very tactical
Yeah,
position.
it's well out of Western strike range with anything Ukraine would ever get in their
That's
wildest dreams.
unbelievable. You sent me that. You sent me this picture, but I didn't realize. That's crazy.
Yeah, I
And
just sent you the
all
tank
of
part, the
this-
tank
get
plant
all of
part.
the Soviet
Without
housing.
there's like
just-
there's gyms and there's a whole hospital on site. It's basically a self-contained city.
I went
At
to
first glance, it looks like it's a mountain in the middle of the city.
the American Airlines campus in Dallas. My dad works for American Airlines, and that I thought that place was crazy because they have like 30 like 10 15 story buildings on their campus, and it's like a Google, like Google, how they have like you go in and everybody there's like pool tables and like foosball tables and weird chairs everywhere, and they're trying to be all hippie and cool. And then I just look at this and I'm like, oh my god, it's unbelievable.
Yep.
Soviets built some cool
but fear
stuff.
not. The Germans just opened up a Rheinmetall operation in Ukraine. Fear not, Ukrainians. All will be well.
Did they? Wait, did they actually? Wait, no, there's no way they
Yes, they
opened
did.
one.
They just
They
announced
started
like
it?
last week. Yes, it's now in operation. And
How? Wait, we haven't seen a single picture. When they
For
break
all
down?
of you tankies, by the way.
dealing with repairs.
Oh, so it's
So basically, they
a
opened the
job.
big ass garage.
Yeah, that's not
Basically,
a.
yeah, they're refurbishing things and calling it new production.
Also, for all of you tankies and tanky enjoyers, Uralvagonzavod kept its name. It is in fact the Felix Dzerzhinsky Scientific Production Plant, Uralvagonzavod.
Glorious.
Glorious.
Probably the most decorated factory in Russia.
Iron chariots for Iron Felix.
If you
Basically.
guys have some questions in the chat, you can go ahead and throw up questions now. I'll be watching the chat. And
Somebody
answering
asked where I was from. I was born in the Kazakhstani SSR in the latter years of the Soviet Union, and I've lived in Moscow for most of my life.
Fun fact, very briefly, the Kazakh SSR made up the entirety of the Soviet Union for about an hour or
Was
so.
the very last to go. Yes, Nazarbayev was a very, very intransigent man. Let's put it that way.
It's funny. I asked
And
one of
then
my
you go
Kazakh friends about Nazarbayev once. What do you think about Nazarbayev? And this was before he was replaced, right? It's like, I hope that man never dies. And then after,
Yeah, he's basically
I'm happy he's gone.
He's like Lukashenko levels. Like there's Putin, who's like the apparatchik type, security official, boring gray suit. And then there was Luka and Nazarbayev, like the Soviet-sized They sort of embodied the spirit of Leonid Brezhnev.
Oh, I can't even quantify. Quantify that with words, but that is so on point.
I'm not Kazakh. I am ethnically Russian.
I was going to say Nazarbayev was a Soviet institution,
But
so
was
was
Lukashenko.
Brezhnev because he didn't do anything.
Nazarbayev, I think, was the only post-Soviet leader to have ascended from top position to top position. So he was general secretary of the Kazakh SSR, and then he went straight to president.
No, Lukashenko as well, if I'm not
I
mistaken.
believe Lukashenko was simply a member of the Supreme Soviet and then won an election.
I'll have to look that up to double check.
I think, but I know Nazarbayev might have been the only one to have just gone straight over. Lukashenko was actually the only member of the Belarusian presidium of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union to vote against the liquidation of the Soviet Union. So kudos to him.
Calibrated question opinion on NATO's Stoltenberg and Orban meeting. Apparently Hungary won't send troops or weapons to Ukraine for peacekeeping missions, unlike the other 31 members. They're doing the smart thing right now. Orban is very popular in Hungary. What he's doing in not aiding the war in Ukraine is very popular at home. So, he's not pissing anybody off by doing this, except the people in the EU who want him to. And I think he's honestly winning out right now because he's not being removed. He's not being forced out of his position. And he's not making himself an enemy of the Russian state, which is a large gas supplier for Hungary. So I don't know if you guys have any opinions on this.
On Orban not wanting to send peacekeepers, I mean that's par for the course. He's been pushing the idea lately of being able to opt out of certain missions. It kind of undermines the idea of NATO, but it allows them. He's trying to give them a way to do things without forcing him to veto them, because there's a unanimity requirement in some aspects. I might be conflating the unanimity requirement of the EU with that of with NATO, but he was pushing recently like an opt-out option to basically, we don't want to do it, which forces us to vote against it, which blocks you from doing it. So just let us opt out and do your thing, kind of thing. But they're not going to accept that, I don't think.
He's doing some. I think the closest analogy, I suppose, would be de Gaulle sort of moving France back from their NATO duties and obligations. So there is, I wouldn't call it precedent, but it's been done to some degree.
That's fair. I mean, de Gaulle pulled France out of the structures of NATO, but never actually left the alliance, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he went from, France had the whole leadership position thing because they were a winning ally member thing, and then he moved it back to like regular member, like Spain and stuff was.
All right, here's this question. Will Russia retreat from Ukraine like the Soviets did in Afghanistan?
Nope, it's existential.
I don't know. Yeah, so first off, like Alex said, it's an existential crisis for Russia. They can't retreat. Retreat would be the end of the Putin regime in Russia, the end of basically everything they have going for them right now. So they are not going to leave, but I'm curious as to why you think they would need to leave. They're obviously winning. Their economy is not being impacted. Their military is becoming stronger. Their economy has been impacted, but it's not struggling by any means. In fact, it's running too hot. I'm curious as to where you're getting this idea that the Soviets will need to retreat. The side that is struggling right now,
the Soviets won't need to retreat because they're gone.
We're not the Soviets yet.
Yeah, the Soviets will not.
So you're telling me there's a chance? Awesome.
There's a chance. The Russians will not have to retreat because they're not in a losing position. They're not like are you seeing men get ripped off the street in Russia, thrown into vans, beat up, fist fights happening because they don't have enough manpower?
Yeah, there's no indication Ukraine can mount any sort of counteroffensive capable of reclaiming lost territory, let alone small concessions they've made by retreating in the last 6 months from places. This is an outrageous assertion to suggest that Russia is going to need to leave any land that they occupy currently. This is never going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, never say never. You could be forced out of
it's
an area,
one in a million type chance.
A full retreat, like something like Afghanistan. Afghanistan was very far away. Ukraine is America's Afghanistan.
That was a political move too. To reconsolidate late 80s when the Soviet Union was going through a lot of financial turmoil.
Yeah,
and
Afghanistan was.
If you think about it, the logic of Ukraine is the same logic as Afghanistan. The objective is to bloodlet Russia, just as it was to bloodlet the Soviet Union. Except Ukraine isn't Afghanistan, and it's not.
Ukraine's not expeditionary like Afghanistan.
Ukraine isn't Afghanistan, first off, so you don't have the geography alone for some sort of guerrilla war that can last 10 years and can wear down on an occupying force doesn't exist. That's your flat farmland. You can see people coming from a mile away. There's no caves to hide in. You can clear out basements in cities. Like that's none of that stuff is going to happen.
A guerrilla war might have been more long lasting than this.
Yeah, I think that the Russians have very, very good means and intelligence assets in Ukraine. I think that they could have really. I mean, there would have been some damage, obviously, and there would have been some insurgency, but I don't think anything at the level of. I mean, Afghanistan. It never ended. It hasn't ended for them for like 100 years now. They've just been in constant insurgency. So I don't know. It just
and just look at what's been
Afghanistan. People in Afghanistan are living in mud huts with goats, and that's not to bring those people down, but that they're not. It's not. You don't have a lot you're living for out there. So when somebody comes in and starts killing you and killing your family, that's the only thing you have. You're going to fight. Ukraine, there are people still in nightclubs. There's still men in nightclubs in Kiev partying while this war is going on. You're talking about first world human beings that if they have a choice between not fighting and fighting, they're going to choose not fighting every single time. Whereas people in other parts of the world might choose fighting because they don't have really anything better, and what the very little that is being taken away, pushes them into that sort of category.
Pretty sure that the nightclubs are worse for Ukrainian morale than the goat herding was for Afghan morale, to be honest.
Imagine you're trapped in the trenches in Donbass for 2 years, and you see the news, and there's people dancing in nightclubs in Kiev as though nothing's going on. I might lose my shit.
Oh yeah. I mean, now, try this on for size. Recently, I heard that the reason Ukraine has more injured men fighting in the trenches is because, unlike the Russian men who are injured who die, Ukrainian injured people are rescued and gladly and courageously volunteer to get, reshuffled in to the combat zone. I mean, this
strikes me as the classic image of survivorship bias of a World War I fighter, where there's the red dots where it gets shot. That's what that reminds me of. If there's no injured people in the trenches, it's probably because they're being evacuated from the trenches. If there are injured people in the other trench, it's probably because they're not being evacuated.
Right. It's not that. Oh no, they're dead. No, they're not. Sorry.
And well, then we'd be seeing a lot of dead. But
here's
the thing:
injured men.
if that was true, then we'd be seeing a lot of dead people in those trenches too.
I'm more and more convinced every day now that the estimated casualty numbers on both sides are just so astronomically inaccurate. Like, just remove a 0 or 2 from some of those. Like, yes, there's lots of injuries, but KIAs, some of us, whether it's, some would say sadistic, spend a lot of time online looking at videos of military equipment or infantry getting attacked. And they're pretty good throughout the week of showing you everything that's happened. And if you just base some of it off of those estimates, I don't think Telegram is a very good indicator, or social media, because a lot of
Telegram is not a good indicator.
No,
and we see
human
it constantly because people don't keep track of what they see on Telegram. They don't take the time. There's so much information there. They don't verify everything.
Right.
Like a certain someone, I'm not naming names, has been talking about dead Russians popping up on his Telegram timeline constantly. Well, the last one, the one he sent you to, was from 8 months ago, and he's not verifying that, so he thinks it's something that happened this week.
Right. Oh no, the War Widow said. Oh no, it's a yes. Did you see the date?
He's a professional idiot though. Why? They're just not. You can't. You're trying to bring reason and logic to a retard conversation. It doesn't add up.
It's like the BMP, it's like the BTR Bradley clip that everybody turned into some sort of glorious ejaculative victory and then turned out to be absolute horseshit.
Oh yeah, the one where the Bradley got hit by the FPVs like 20 seconds later.
No, but the funniest thing is I don't remember what fucking Western newspaper it was, but apparently they had the article with the crew of that exact Bradley, and apparently the 30mm BTR cannon fucking shredded their optics, and the commander ordered the Bradley to ram the thing.
Oh.
Or if you see a totally burned out Bradley in pictures, you get comments like, well, see, American equipment saves lives. It's like, how can you make that determination by looking at this?
It does. I mean, technically, it does save lives if especially if the vehicles are built for that very sole specific reason. Because the U.S. and NATO does. I'm not saying they value their soldiers' lives more. That's not what I'm saying. But in terms of the wars we've been fighting, casualties on our end look horrible. That's the worst thing that can happen in like Afghanistan, Iraq, those places, because we're not, we shouldn't be taking casualties in these kind of conflicts. And a lot of it came down to like IEDs. So yeah, I mean, Western like MRAPs are like, they're pretty survivable. The crews do survive, but it's also 4 or 5 times more expensive than the Russian alternative that also does a pretty good job. And it's 3 times heavier, which doesn't apply in most areas of Ukraine during most times of the year. So there is a certain Western survivability aspect to it, but you also have to remember that survivability aspect comes with all of the issues that we see with Western equipment. A lot of they're super heavy, very over complex, and even like the survival aspects of it, like the M1 Abrams has like the blowout panels. That's what everybody always talks about. If those blowout panels go, that tank is done. The only reason that happens is to save the crew from getting burned alive. But that tank is like structurally compromised.
The ammo's cooked. In order for the blowout panels to deploy, the ammo load has to cook off.
Yeah.
The other interesting one was, I remember an article that admitted that Ukrainian dismounts ride on their Bradleys, not inside them, which does say a lot about dismount survivability. Perhaps the crew does survive, but the dismounts are less lucky.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of dismounts go very poorly out of both Bradleys and M113s. So
yeah,
I mean, you look at how the Russians are never inside of their BMPs, dude. Ever.
No, they're always like riding them like
honestly, I've been in a BMP, a BMD, a BTR, whatever. I've done exercises in them. They're fucking nightmarish to come out of because we enjoy putting the engine in the back of things.
Exactly.
Which means there can't be one of those big fat doors in the back.
There's
You
a
have to
hatch.
climb out between the wheel wells, which means you can't get out while it's moving. So everyone rides on the armor, and it's genuinely safer. I mean, fire's
thinking
coming
if
in,
if
you
a
get
mine
off.
goes off, if a mine goes off, I would rather be on top of the vehicle than underneath it. I would rather get blown off of the vehicle than be in inside of like a fiery
Yeah.
metal box.
Yeah, I mean, like
Yeah,
the worst
the
thing that
only
can happen is
issue-
you can break a couple limbs landing. If you're
The only
inside
issue
of it,
being
you're
outside is
missed.
the drones.
Yeah, I mean, there's that, but an FPV drone is going to penetrate any of those vehicles. So being
Not
inside
only,
or outside, it's
but- yeah.
just taking a chance if you're going to get hit by the actual FPV or not. Plus,
Yeah, and look at the Bradleys.
in a very cold, sadistic way, meat armor. What it's like
Yeah.
ERA.
I mean, if you look at the Bradleys, or if you look at the Bradleys or the Abrams, those won't stand up against a Russian or Soviet-made AT-4 or Russian-made AT-5 ATGM. Not going to happen. So it really doesn't matter, this talk of, survivability. Well, right, the Abrams may be a little different, but the Bradley and the MRAP, especially the MRAP, wasn't made to withstand anti-tank guided missile from an advanced military. It was made to be robust against IEDs, RPGs, grenade, things like that.
If you think about
Not a guided missile from like 2 kilometers away. No, sorry.
No tank is made to withstand ATGMs, because the ATGMs, it's the opposite. ATGMs are made to overwhelm the tank. It's a counter to a tank. Older tanks.
That's why
don't
our
have
tanks
that-
fire ATGMs.
Most of the fire you see from these days from the Russians is just ATGM after ATGM after ATGM. And good,
It's
because
great.
they have so
Almost
many.
like it's almost like we designed our tanks to fire them.
Exactly.
All right. Let's see.
I'm also loving the scoot and shoot. There's a lot of discussion about how can you use an electric scooter. I mean, probably not that well, but I don't know how much of it was comedic relief. But I have seen effective use of electric bicycles, which have a very low heat signature comparatively to like a motor vehicle. And they have been firing those shoulder-launched AT-4s, and they've been fucking up the Ukrainian military with that, in and out. And the cope is, you can't ride a bike on this terrain. Can't happen. That's a PR stunt. It's like, okay.
Well, some of the gnarliest clips of Russian assault troops we've seen have featured motorcycles, and that was
right. And now they're electric bicycles in some cases, because it's an even
I just
lower
want to
heat
see
signature.
a barn built around an electric bicycle. I just want to come full circle.
I've seen a caged up I've seen a caged up motorcycle.
I mean,
All
like
the
a
time.
turtle tank, like a whole barn built around it, and it's just a guy in a bike inside. I just want to see that.
So basically, what you mean is a shed on wheels,
Yes.
like a small shed.
No, a large one.
But the question is, can you disguise it by parking it in the backyard of someone's house?
Clever. Maybe even put a cow in it, or a horse, and like it's literally just a barn.
Barn moment, huh?
All right, Scott's back.
Sorry, I'm having issues with my mic and stuff. I don't know what's going
Right.
on.
So there will be no NATO versus Russia. Guys
okay.
asked this like 400 times. No, there will be no NATO versus
He
Russia.
has every third message or something. I keep seeing it.
I had to answer him. That would be the end of everything.
Yeah, if there is NATO versus Russia, we all die.
And it would be a slow roll too. Everyone would start out by saying, no, we'll never use nukes. No. And then like the weird sabotage would occur, and weird places would get blown up in like cities throughout the US and Russia and Europe. And then it would just get really ugly.
Yeah, it's not even about weird things getting blown up. It's just the way Europeans fight wars. We fight total war. We go after each other's supply lines. If you're flying bombing missions, we're going after your airfields. If you're supporting your airfields, we're going after those support structures, and eventually you're doing counter value.
Right, you'd have to
Eventually, we
overwhelm.
hand out nuclear shells to our artillery crews.
Well, yeah, you could do that. I mean, you'd have to overwhelm NATO's defenses in a conventional first strike to such a point where you'd kill the political will basically to respond, which would be 50-50 because it would either rally around it or totally fall apart.
So
So
we have the Zircon for.
you'd have to, I mean, the Russians would have to use a lot of missiles, like thousands of missiles to do enough damage to take out all of Western European airfields and Eastern European airfields. I mean, theoretically, they had the numbers in the Soviet Union to do it. Whether they still have those today, I don't know. But I just don't foresee that happening, and that's why I think it will still be a long stretch to see F-16s or Mirage 2000s in Ukraine. I just the logistical.
I think we'll see the Mirage 2000s because there aren't that many of them.
Where are they going to? But those would have to be parked on Ukrainian airfields. Then they would have to.
To be honest, I think the Mirage 2000 is perhaps a more robust aircraft, a little more a little more prepared for taking off from slightly rougher airways.
Yeah, it's because they're getting the Dash 5 variant, which there aren't
Yeah,
many
the ones
of, but that's
the export ones.
well, the export ones are 5Fs, and Macron specified Dash 5s, so it includes the 5Fs, but there aren't that many of them, to be honest. They're about equivalent to the RMVs, but the RMVs are still being midlife upgraded, so those aren't on the table. Everybody talks about what everybody does is they ignore that he's specifically talking about the Dash 5s. So it's like, oh, but there's like 400 Mirage 2000s. But the D and N variants by law cannot be exported, so they're being dismantled. So that's 200 of them that are not available. France has 26 Dash 5s. The Hellenic Air Force gave their Dash 5s back to France in exchange for Rafales. So they might have 40 in all. That's not a lot of airframes.
If we take the really granular, stupid generational consideration for aircraft, what is a Mirage? A Mirage to like Dash 5? Single plus, no pluses?
Single engine.
No, as in like, is it 4 plus? Is it 4 nothing? Is it 4 plus plus?
4 plus, depending on the
It's
radar targeting suite.
It borrows avionics from it borrows systems from the Rafale. Like it has the fancy glass cockpit with the multiple displays. It has the new radar able to use the Mikas, but I don't think it has. But yeah, so it has some 4 parts from the Rafale, but it's I think it's still maybe 4 plus to be most generous. Probably not 4, but it's actually no. I would say it's an upgrade over their first generation MiGs, but it's not on par with Russia's newer like Su-35s and shit. So 4 or 4 plus.
Basically, it's running up against 30 SM2s and 35 S's, which is not
And
particularly fair.
How easy is it?
And that's not even counting the 57.
Right.
I mean, it's not running up against anything because those R-27s are sniping it from 400 kilometers away. But let's be real.
How easy is it to outfit the Mirage with Ukrainian or Soviet era air-to-air missiles or air-to-surface missiles that Ukraine still has a decent number of, but they just don't have enough planes really or pilots to fly them. So
the radar bands don't match for the primary radar and for the missile targeting, and most Soviet air-to-ground missiles are TV guided, so the radar doesn't really matter much. You'd have to fit an extra screen into the cockpit, basically.
It's also worth mentioning that if F-16s or Mirages end up in Ukraine, it'll be the first time in this conflict that friend or foe identification systems work.
That will be a big difference.
So the second it shows up on radar, that's a foe. We fire at it. There's no delay in figuring out if it's one of theirs or not.
True. This is sort of the if we go back to basically what I think is the reason Oryx gave up is because you can't pass off a burned out T-72 as either side. Like it's an F-16. It's very, very clearly one side's aircraft.
Yeah, he did stop right when all of the Western equipment started coming in for like at the end of the counteroffensive. Because during the entire counteroffensive, you could just it was all Western armor. It was all MRAPs and M113s and Leopards and Bradleys. So it was you can't lie about what the losses are, and that doesn't
Pretty unambiguous.
get you
Somebody
that
said
doesn't get you a
somebody
job.
said transponders. IFF is not a transponder based system.
Yeah.
Do
How
you
far
think-
will the comedian's popularity
Well,
have to fall
can I
before the
say one
State
thing,
Department
Scott?
finds another puppet?
Could I
Sorry,
add one
so-
thing real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you all foresee another red line being crossed if 4, 5, 6 F-16s show up and it becomes apparent that their sorties are being launched from a Polish or Romanian airfield and Russia just goes, whatever, we'll take the plane down, but we won't strike the airfield in NATO territory.
Well,
whatever. That's not a
the-
we're not gonna be
The
bothered
red
by that.
line talk. This always frustrates me. We have voiced very few red lines. The West voices a red line, they cross it, and then they pretend it's a Russian red line. It happened with the tanks, it happened with the missiles, whatever. We have voiced, basically, generally speaking, 3 red lines. The first one led to the SMO. The second line they're trying to cross now, so God knows what that will lead to. And the third line is giving Ukraine nuclear weapons, which will just fucking end the world. If they take off from Romania, we'll shoot them down. If they get really cocky, God knows, to be quite honest.
I don't think they're going to strike the bases. There's not enough F-16s. Unless hundreds of F-16s are flying out, and then those are going to have NATO pilots, and that's NATO. That's not Ukraine by any stretch of the imagination. So that's a war. So they can't do that. And if they're flying 12 F-16s in and out of the country and arming them and doing sorties, I mean, it's not worth starting a war with NATO because Russia doesn't necessarily know if they're like, you don't know if you're going to win that war. That war is definitely going to go nuclear. You don't want to fight that war at all costs just because you don't. So you enforce whatever red lines, whether they're Russian red lines or not. I think that there are red lines being crossed constantly. I don't think that these are openly stated, we're going to do X if this red line is crossed. But I do think that there are red lines that are Russian red lines that are being crossed. Using Western weapons on Russian soil, the Crimean Bridge, Nord Stream, these are all red lines, whether, Putin comes out and says you crossed red line or not. That changes the calculus, that changes the approach. And I always say the red lines are going to be enforced. You will see those red lines enforced. They're just going to be like the ones on my map, and they're going to be way, way, way more west than you expect them to be. That's
the thing
where the red
is,
lines
the thing
are.
is, many expect like a clear, this is a red line, this is what we do if you cross it, but that kind of defeats the purpose of brinksmanship. The whole point is the ambiguity, so you have to take a gamble because you don't know what they're going to do and you have to speculate.
Yeah.
The other thing is the West is 1 degree removed from any red line they cross because Ukraine takes the punishment for it at this point.
Alex sounds like he's smoking.
That's exactly what I'm doing.
Awesome. Cool. I thought so.
Cigarettes, Scott, cigarettes.
I know. I could just hear the holding something in your lungs while talking sound, which makes me want to go smoke so bad.
See, that's why that's when I'm silent for too long is because I stepped out for a papyrosa.
All right.
Not a
How about
cigarette.
this question? How far will the comedian's popularity? So Zelensky, we talked about him getting removed, but how far do you think it will have to fall? Because he's already
Internally or externally?
Let's do both. Because I think that it's 2 different answers. So internally, how far does his popularity have to fall?
Internally, it would have to plummet pretty goddamn far.
I don't think that there's any sort of internal situation right now that will bring down Zelensky or force him out. I don't think that they don't have the energy for a Maidan sort of thing. I think that the Ukrainian government has way too much control at this point. They can root out any of this, infighting sort of stuff or rebellion or anything like that. And all of the men are being sent to fight. So there's not even men to do it. You don't have a very you don't have a high unemployed 20 or 18 to 27-year-old male population who's very pissed off at the government. And that's usually what you need to start a coup or something like that.
They do have an 18 to 27-year-old pissed off population. They just sent them off to get killed.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're not sitting at home like wondering why their government is screwing them over, and they have free time on their hands, and they're like, "Hey, let's go protest in the middle of the city for weeks." That's not the situation Ukraine is in. So, and now, what about external, Alex?
Well, I mean, externally, I think
We're
he's
gonna leave external to the
pretty
Westerners.
secure.
Yeah, I think Zelensky will be removed if it gets to the point where they need to remove Zelensky because Zelensky is not enabling something that they want to happen. Until that happens, I don't think he's going anywhere. It's a puppet.
Yeah.
It's their job.
And that'll be a long time, too, because
All right.
they've said on record many times the ultimate determinator of the Ukrainian people are the Ukrainian people and Zelensky. We will respect any decision they make, blah, blah, blah. So they can't, it'd be hard to force their hand now. It would be hard to do that.
How much more powerful is the Russian military now compared to at the start of the war? This is a good question. There's this constant idea in the pro-Ukrainian information space, the pro-Western information space, that Russia is somehow being significantly degraded in this war. Yeah, they don't have their massive Soviet surplus now because they used it, but it was getting to the point where it needed to be used anyway. So kind of decent timing, at least, to use it and get rid of it before it's all rot. But what you're going to see now is a Russian military that is prioritized, streamlined, and has cut way back on their corruption. I'm pretty sure that's a majority of the movement that we just saw throughout the MOD. We saw a lot of arrests for bribery and stuff, and that might be internal politics. It's not always face level or face value corruption or whatever. You can't just be trying to get rid of people that don't want to move, this, that, and the other. There's always those things that happen in any government or any business or anything. But what it looks like is that a number of the what I would consider peacetime generals, generals that come up through the ranks without actually being in a war, without actually having the national pride, and I'm just generalizing. Those generals have now been pushed out. You have younger people in the MOD and in the Russian military making decisions. Things seem to be happening a little bit quicker. And I think that what you're really seeing right now is, I always reference it like it's a sharpened knife, right? When Russia went into Ukraine in 2022, they were like a giant Bowie knife, right? They had this huge military, lots of surplus, lots of ammunition, lots of missiles. But the blade wasn't the sharpest. They didn't have the PGMs. They didn't have the drone infrastructure. They didn't have the ISR capabilities that they have now. Things like cluster munition warheads on the KH-101, massive improvements in Iskander accuracy, Tornado S accuracy through enhanced GPS chips that are in the warhead. We've seen that happen. We've seen the drones alone is pretty significant. Lancet did not exist before the start of the war, or it didn't exist in the same way that it does now. It really came to prominence during this conflict. I think the Russian military is now a monster. It is a beast. It has purpose, it has direction, and it has meaning. It's the exact opposite thing of what the West wanted the Russian military to look like after 2.5 years of long, continuous, high intensity war in Ukraine. And that's our fault. We underestimated the industrial capacity. And primarily, what I think happened was the West approached Russia as if every single Russian were their enemy, instead of Putin being the enemy and trying to pull the Russians away from Putin and cause internal issues. We weren't able to do that because select Western or Eastern European countries, also, some German and British as well, and French, seem to have this innate Russophobia. And whatever, be racist against whoever you want to be. No, you can't change people's minds. If you hated the Soviet Union and you hated what they did to your family, whatever, I understand that kind of line of logic and that reasoning. But if you want to win, sometimes you have to just buck up and say, I might hate the Russians, I might hate X group of people, but if I can use them to achieve my long-term objectives, why would I not utilize that asset instead of going for no reason, blaming every single Russian for the war in Ukraine, which every single Russian does not feel like they are necessarily responsible for that war at all, and sanctioning every single Russian, making it every single Russian's problem. Now you have united the Russian nation against the West, who is attacking them. It makes no sense. It didn't.
Well, that's the thing, right? There was two factions in this in the West. There was, I'll begrudgingly say, the sane people, and the others. We should listen to the Baltics and do everything they say because they know Russia best.
Yeah,
and that's what happened. Now, I don't think there was ever a possibility of causing enough internal strife in Russia to topple the government, because who's going to take your side on that? The Russian liberals. Everyone in Russia hates them,
and they all left. And they all left because they don't want to be in Russia. They all left.
And the other thing is, if you know Russian history, you have to ask one thing. It takes a lot to get Russians off their asses and to stand. But once they stand, they are a force of nature. And do you really want that? Do you remember what the Europeans thought they wanted that in 1917, and we ended up with a Soviet Union.
And the Germans thought they wanted it, and the French thought they wanted it. Everybody thought they wanted
Russia
it.
is a locomotive. It starts slowly, but then there is no stopping.
Exactly, and it's always has been like this. This isn't a new development either. So it was foolish, and if you push them too hard, it makes them feel like it's an attack against. The West positioned the whole thing like it's an attack against the Russianness, and that's a rally against the flag, and you done fucked up, my friend.
Yeah, that's a big old mistake. There's a couple things you don't want to do, and upsetting people and bringing them together and to unite against a common enemy and you are that enemy is just not. Divide and conquer is a much better way to go about things usually than unite and fight head on. All right, question for the guests. This is actually a good question. 1 year on, which side blew up the Nova Kakhovka Dam? Did Russia delay the AFU river crossing, or was it AFU prep work for Krinky op to support an AFU breakthrough? Thoughts? I'm going to go ahead and cover this real quick. I've covered this multiple times, and then I'll let you guys go ahead and discuss it. I always like to say I don't know, because we don't know. I just look at who benefited from it and what the timing was on it. So the Ukrainians started, they were planning on starting this operation, the summer counteroffensive, which was supposed to be a spring counteroffensive, at the beginning of June. I believe it was June 4th or June 6th. Can't remember if it was D-Day or if it was 2 days before Normandy landing. Anyway,
the big leopard casualties came in June the 5th.
Okay, so June the 4th. Yeah, it was June 4th. I thought so. The Nova Kakhovka Dam was blown up. We don't know by who. Both sides blamed each other. The relevant information is that the Ukrainians were already setting up. They had pillaged civilian surface craft boats, basically, from Odessa, Nikolaev, and Kherson regions. They had this army of small boats ready to go. It definitely seems like what the Ukrainian goal was if the Ukrainians blew the dam, and I'm going to let you guys make your own conclusions on this, is that the Ukrainians wanted to a couple of things. They wanted to reduce the water in the Kakhovka reservoir, which is the reservoir that runs up by Zaporozhye. It feeds Ernagodar, the nuclear power plant, and crossing it, it's very difficult. We've seen the Ukrainians try to cross it, I think, on 2 separate occasions with barges, trying to infiltrate the Ernagodar nuclear power plant. Both of those failed. British special forces were said to be involved with one of them. Russian helicopters took care of them. It's very hard to cross a large body of water and perform a landing. It's one of the more difficult military operations to perform. So by blowing the dam, they completely drained the water. Another thing to look at was prior to the dam being blown, the Ukrainians had started filling the reservoir with a lot of water because they control the inlets to the north. So they started allowing more water to come into the dam, and they weren't allowing water to leave the bottom. So the reservoir was rising. Come June 4th, early in the morning, the dam is blown. All of that water, with all that pressure, completely destroys the dam. Everything downstream is flooded. I will actually take us over to my map so I can just show you guys. And this map is kind of deceiving because I don't think the river. Oh, I'm in America. I was looking at Detroit. The river is kind of deceiving now because it doesn't look like this. These are old satellite images. This is not how the river looks. It's probably either lower or higher, depending. Just like this reservoir up to the north no longer looks like this. There are pieces of land that you can see throughout. The shores are much further in, and there's grass growing now and stuff like that. So this is not representative of the situation. But this is the reservoir that I was referring to. You can see down here is the hold on. Down here is the Kakhovka Dam. This is the dam that was blown. All of the water from the reservoir rushed down. It mostly washed out Russian entrenched positions on this bank. This bank of the river is higher, and this delta was completely flooded and washed away. There were Russian positions on these little islands, and all along this shoreline. All of those Russian positions were flooded, washed away. The Russians had to move back. And then shortly after this, the Ukrainian counteroffensive in Zaporozhye began. What I believe the goal was that when this operation started, the Russians were going to have to pull men from this region over here to defend. And if this was successful, like they had planned it to be, there would have been a much deeper penetration towards Tokmak. Once the Russians rotated as many reserves as they needed into this area, and these areas over here became weaker, the Ukrainians would then launch an operation from Nikopol towards Ernagodar over the very, very reduced reservoir. And then at the exact same time, roughly, I would say this operation to reach Tokmak would have taken 1 to 2 weeks in the Ukrainian mind, just depending, and securing it. After that 1 to 2 week time period, the water should have mostly subsided, drained out from this area, and it would be much more possible for a Ukrainian water landing, which we saw around the Antonovsky Bridge and that we saw in the Krinky area. So I do believe that the Ukrainians blew this. The timing was very peculiar. The blowing of the dam actually reduced Russian defensive capabilities along this entire region. So doesn't really benefit the Russians. This reservoir would have been nice for the Russians to have as a protection barrier for Unagardar, because you would have seen the Ukrainians building up over here, and then they have to cross a 6-mile stretch, which is like 10, 12 kilometers over to the actual nuclear power plant, which has always been a long standing thorn and goal of the Ukrainian and British governments. So that's my hot take on it. I would love to hear your guys's.
We didn't hear, Scott, Crimea Beach Party 2023, because all of the strategic maps published by Ukraine showed routes in the direction you were just showing on your map, and how better to do that than to sort of commit ecological and environmental sabotage to achieve a dry reservoir.
And what does it matter when you can just say the Russians did it? And what does it matter? You just say the Russians did it. Oh, it was the Russians.
Of course, the nasty Russian orcs did it. Of course. Now, we all know the Russians have done some things one way or another historically, but that's neither here nor there. There is, to quote one of my friends and Vaughn's friend, a Fayism, Ukraine is low-rent version of Russia. Little army loses to big, little Soviet army loses to big Soviet army. And the same thing goes with the propaganda. Little Soviet country makes worse propaganda than big Soviet country. So we all know who blew up this dam. It's not a surprise. And it didn't work out for them because the counteroffensive basically stalled out. But that's what they wanted to do. They were dead set on attacking Crimea. And
are they still in Krinky? I still hear people saying that they're in Krinky. I don't know.
There's still occasionally a pro-Ukraine Telegram channel will claim that this is an expeditionary landing. We're back in Krinky, or the main narrative is these 5 guys are refortifying or resupplying the little unit that's there. Ha ha ha! There's nothing you can do to get us out of Krinky and stuff like that.
For all the Russian turbo patriots that claim that Krinky is some sort of strategic defeat, I, as a military man trained classically in the military arts, I would pay money for infinite repeats of the Krinky operation, where the Ukrainians willingly jump into a place that we have full fire control over and sit there like good little targets.
Yeah, keep hiding in half-destroyed buildings. There's basements there. Okay, well, when the whole thing crumbles on you and the foundation cracks and the roof caves in, oh no, there's bunkers here from the Soviet days. It's like, what are you talking about?
I mean, for Christ's sake,
It's a
Krinky's not
riverbed.
a particularly big place. If you don't know where they are, just iron it. No one lives there.
Yeah.
Right, and then you hear, this is Ruski Mir, the leveling of towns. It's like, right, well, when people keep stubbornly digging in over and over and over again and continue to fire upon your troops, you've got to get rid of them.
It's also our fucking town. We'll pay the money to fix it.
I also like how that argument is quite often brought up, that Russia is like destroying places. But if you really look at it, I mean, Mariupol was probably the most extreme example because of the extended urban battle that was fought there. It wasn't the Russians. I mean, they would have not destroyed Mariupol if they had the option.
I'd say Arkhmovsk is probably the most devastated place in this conflict.
I mean, like in terms of actual like large cities, like Bakhmut is, it's
wait for us to get to
Detroit,
Commentators. We'll hear all those screams all over again.
Yeah,
the thing about fighting in cities is that it involves fighting in cities and brings with it everything that's associated with fighting in cities. Yep. If you don't want your cities to be leveled, don't hide in the buildings.
Yep. But even then, even the Mariupol situation, and I know I think it's fully for propaganda purposes, but immediately they went in and started rebuilding. Even if for propaganda purposes. Wouldn't you love to see Israel going in and maybe doing some rebuilding in Gaza just for propaganda purposes, and not building settler homes, but actually trying to do some rebuilding. I mean, it's like, I don't know. I don't get the Russians are just destroying towns, like Chechnya all over again. It's it's like, no, where are you seeing this? Even Mariupol was like, there were just specific areas where the fighting was focused the entire time, and those specific like high-rise residential buildings got burned out and stuff. But it's
Well,
not.
I mean, there was that incident where that Ukrainian MiG-29 fired right into a high-rise.
Yeah.
That was publicized all over the place in the beginning of the war until they realized that until OS did its thing, and wait, that's Ukrainian camo. Wait, that's the heat from the from the building making the seeker freak the fuck out. But yeah. But like I said, if you're gonna fight in cities, it involves fighting in cities. Unless you're having a slap fight, there isn't going to be much standing left around you.
Yeah. All right. If the Russians keep targeting gas storage,
Actually, Scott, do you mind if I tackle the dam question?
Oh yeah, go ahead. Which one was it? Oh yeah, the Ernagodar. Go ahead, go for it.
Right, because a while after it happened, I put together a massive mega thread of what everyone was investigating about the dam, and I was working with pro-Ukraine people, with Schnitzel and a few others to figure this out, and the answer is both and neither. The dam just popped, gave in under stress and popped. No one actually blew it up. Now, both sides contributed to it. Well, I say both sides. Well, the Ukrainians, raised the water levels upstream, which would have forced the Russians to open the slats to drain, but they can't because they were damaged. Because guess who's been bombing the fucking dam? Because clearly the Russians aren't bombing a dam that they're holding. But no, no one expressly put explosive under it and blew it. It just gave in under the weight of much more water than it's designed to hold back, under much more strain, under being constantly bombarded, and it just popped. Not the answer people are looking for, but based on a dozen people go and dozens of threads in meticulous detail, it really looks like that's what happened.
Yeah, that's a sober, objective look at it. I tend to agree that that's the case. I mostly preface it with sort of the key bono, and I think at the time for Ukraine's offensive interests, that was a good thing.
I would like to interlude. Final comment of the damn question. Sorry. Sergei Sorovikin, when voicing our retreat from Kherson City, that the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam and the separation of our two forces in the area was basically the primary reason. So we knew this was something they had planned.
Yeah, I tend to think that it was the Ukrainians. That's the timing is just horribly convenient. The results are extremely expected and obvious to who they benefit. And honestly, I think that the whole Krinky operation and an Ernagodar operation were slated to happen, and then they just hit a wall in Zaporozhye, and it never transpired the way it was supposed to. And then a couple months later, we started getting this random Krinky operation because they had everything ready to go, and they were like, I guess we'll just do this and use it for PR and a distraction from what's happening in Zaporozhye.
It's also, if you look at it, when the withdrawal from Kherson happened, the Russian forces were like, we're withdrawing because we don't trust the Ukrainians to not pop that dam. And the Ukrainians were like, we're not going to pursue because it's a trap and we don't trust the Russians to not pop that dam. That also suggests to me that neither and both kind of thing, like neither actually did it, and it just, based on everything else, just popped under strain.
Yeah, which it could be. I don't know. It's the timing. The timing is crazy. But structural integrity doesn't work around the universe's timing. So, all right. One last question here. If Russia keeps targeting gas storage and energy production, what's going to happen when winter comes? I think that this is
Hell.
the plan. I think that everything is starting to snowball together. I think that the manpower issues, the infrastructure issues, the aid and support issues, ammunition issues, everything's going to start hitting come August, September, October. And then by winter, exactly what you're talking about here, the lack of gas storage and energy generation is going to severely immobilize the Ukrainian army. It's going to make them make it difficult for them to move around. And I think the winter is really that it could be this summer. I don't know how healthy the Ukrainian army is, but by winter, I think we're going to start seeing basically forced retreats from areas because of how bad the logistics situation is becoming for Ukraine.
The Ukrainian heating system is also Soviet style, so it's centrally fed from the thermal power stations, and we have basically obliterated those.
All of them.
Like
Yep.
most of the energy generation is still nuclear, but the actual thermal stations, which feed things like communal heating, etc., houses instead of like the traction system, those are gone. So for citizenry, it's going to suck. They might still move some troops around, but for the common Ukrainian slash brainwashed Russian, it's going to suck badly.
Yeah. It's not going to be a good winter for anybody, and you know the military is going to get all of the emphasis, all of the focus when it comes to this sort of stuff. So you will, like Alex said, you will see the military move, but it starts causing issues all over the place. It's just more fires you have to put out, more time, manpower investment into things that you don't want to be working on. It's just overloading the system, and it's going to
Foments
have
discontent as well.
yeah, and discontent as well. People who are living in the first world are not used to being ripped out of that situation and thrown into a much more difficult situation. So yeah, it's not going to play out very well.
Yeah.
Smeagol or whatever his face is said that they'd be facing 20-hour blackouts during the winter. I'm
Yeah,
like,
At
They're
least.
I'm
already
sorry,
they're,
this
they're
is-
already facing 20-hour blackouts. You cannot do that to people in the winter.
yeah,
Yeah.
this is Western Russia. We're talking about minus 10, 15, 20.
Western Russia.
And it's well, I'm sorry, what the fuck am I supposed to call
I
it?
love it, dude. I love it. It's just funny. Without skipping a beat, Western Russia.
It's Western Russia. It's going to be like minus 20. It's really not going to be a pleasant time.
Yeah, it's not very fun.
You could
And
only
I think
divert. You can only leave people in the dark in Western Russian winter for so long before they start getting
yeah,
fed
and
the
it's
fuck up.
not 1920. Not everybody has the ability to go get cut down firewood and throw it in their big fireplace in their house and keep their house heated throughout the winter. Through that way either. It's different times.
Sorry,
Layering only takes you so far.
can I interlude here for a second with perhaps the most depressing story I have yet shared?
Go for it.
Last winter, during the height of the outages, it was discovered that the Nikolaev shipyard, the birthplace of the Soviet Union's carriers, was left making wood-fired camping stoves as their only production.
That's hey, it's actually a useful thing to be building. Not
Bratan,
that ships
that
aren't
crushed
useful, but
my soul. Why would you say that?
why?
Yeah, the birthplace of the Soviet Union's mightiest warships, the Baku,
That is
Kiev,
soul crushing. What was allowed to happen
was
to
left
Nikolaev?
making burjuika stoves, if you know what those are.
Don't know exactly.
Why make firewood when you could make Kirovs?
You
The Kirovs were
can't.
made in the Baltic.
I don't think they're going to be able to get through much ship production at this current juncture. But ovens,
Hey,
you can do ovens.
Ukraine has half a cruiser. That's their entire navy.
That's
They
all they
have the
need.
Guards
Something
rocket
coming from
cruiser Ukraina, which
That's all they
is
need,
a
dude.
Atlantic class.
That's
Like,
another
what's
thing
the-
that's been pissing me off for the last 2 years. Everyone who keeps saying that Ukraine built Russia's carriers and like battle cruisers and all
No,
that.
the Soviet Union built the Soviet Union's carriers.
Ukraine didn't build shit. The Soviet Union built Soviet ships in Soviet shipyards that happened to be in Soviet Ukraine using Soviet labor and Soviet designers and Soviet materials.
Yep.
Fuck off.
It's like saying that the T-34 is a Ukrainian invention. I believe that was around that claim was around a while in 2022.
It's like saying Ukraine gave up nukes.
It's
They were
like
never
saying
there.
all the Russia.
They-
No, but dude, all the Russian tanks, all of them, except the T-90, because that's a different branch. They're all American tanks because of the transmission.
Absolutely, and they're all T-34 variants because the V2 engine was the very, very early base for all of them.
Yes,
It's
they're
true.
all American tanks, and all
Except the
T-34
T-80.
because
Except the T-80.
yes, because Laser Pig is a dumbass.
Just throw
what a
Molotov,
fucking
throw Molotov down the
numbskull
top
that
and
is.
we'll call it good.
Did
All
you know
right.
that the T-80 does not have a mechanically geared transmission?
No, I didn't know that. But also, you guys already got to have your autistic plane talk, so autistic tank talk we'll save it for next time. We've been on for about an hour and 45 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on. It was a pleasure. I like this group. We'll start doing this. We won't call it a round table, though. We'll call it something else.
Good times. Thanks.
Hexagonal table,
We'll come up with a name.
oddly shaped table.
Yeah,
Don't mind me, I'm being autistic.
the autist table.
There we
get to
go.
talk-
Perfect.
Where we get to talk about tanks, ships, planes, boats, all of the different autistic interests. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you all. If you wouldn't mind liking, subscribing, and sharing the video. If you want to see more of my work or you want to support me, you can go find more of my work on Patreon, Telegram, and Twitter. And those are in the description link for this video. Thank you to my guests, Clown, Zag, and Alex. We'll start doing this more often. I like talking to you guys. So any last words, gentlemen?
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Ditto. Thanks, Scott.
Ditto, ditto, ditto. All right. Everybody take care. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. I will probably have I'll have my demonetized video up sometime today, and then probably the next live stream will be on Monday. Be safe. Don't do anything too stupid, and I will see you guys next time.